This is a fictional story inspired by real dynamics documented in public research on financial coercion, professional undermining in intimate partnerships, and gender equity in legal and corporate workplaces. All characters, institutions, events, and organizations depicted are entirely invented. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or to real organizations is entirely coincidental. She paid for everything. He told everyone she was the problem. After 20 months of silent sacrifice and $214,000 in secret transfers, one dinner table and 3 documents change everything, with 47 minutes until midnight. $214,000. 41 transfers. 20 months. Every note field the same, personal loan, Marcus Bennett. He told his investors he was self-funded. He told his family he was building something. He told her, with the specific warmth of someone who needs something from you, that he did not know what he would do without her. Tonight, he reached for the breadbasket before anyone else at the table had finished unfolding their napkins, and said, in the pleasant voice he reserved for rooms he felt certain of, "I just think, when a woman earns more than her husband, the least she can do is not make it the whole personality." No one laughed, no one said that was not fair, no one even set down their fork. Claire Bennett set her water glass down. Not hard, precisely. He had spent 6 years reading her stillness as submission. It had never once been submission. Her briefcase was on the floor beside her chair. Inside was a manila folder. Inside the folder were 3 documents she had been building for 20 months, in a spreadsheet titled Administrative that she never opened on shared devices. She was a lawyer. She kept records. Her mother had taught her that the only thing that stays when people leave is what is written down. She had not touched the folder since she parked the car. Not yet. "I don't think anyone was making anything a personality," said Patricia Bennett, Marcus's mother, in the voice she used when she wanted to appear neutral and didn't quite manage it. She passed the breadbasket to Gerald, who took a roll without looking up from the table. Gerald Bennett had the specific quality of a man who had spent 40 years in the same house, choosing which conversations to be present for and which ones to sit slightly outside of. Tonight, he had chosen slightly outside. "I'm just saying," Marcus continued, pouring himself more wine. He was wearing the blue Oxford Claire had given him for his birthday 18 months ago, the one that still had the dry cleaning tag tucked into the collar. He had not removed it. "Claire works hard. Everyone at this table knows that. But sometimes I feel like the dinner table is the one place we should be allowed to just be a family." 7:12 p.m. 33 minutes until Lily's bedtime. 4 hours and 47 minutes until midnight. Claire picked up her fork. She cut a piece of roasted chicken into thirds, then into sixths. Her hands were completely still. That was the thing Marcus had never understood about her. The quieter she felt inside, the more motionless her hands became. He had spent 6 years reading her stillness as submission. It had never once been submission. "Marcus," Amy Bennett spoke from across the table. She was 26, with the particular tone of someone who had learned to intervene early because in this family, waiting always made the damage larger. "Can we just have dinner?" "I am having dinner," Marcus said pleasantly. "I am also having a conversation. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Amy." Gerald made a sound that was not quite a cough and not quite agreement. Uncle Robert reached for the salad bowl. His wife Carol had been studying something on her phone under the table for the past 4 minutes with the concentrated focus of a person who had made a decision about where her evening was going to be spent. Claire chewed, swallowed, lifted her water glass. "The Hargrove case," Marcus said then, to no one in particular, tilting his head toward the ceiling with the expression of someone fondly recalling a difficult time. "What was it? 3 weekends? 4? Lily asked me why Mommy lives at work now. I didn't know what to tell her." The weight in the room redistributed, not loudly. The Bennetts had never done anything loudly. That was not how it worked in this house. In this house, things shifted. The angle of Patricia's shoulders, the timing of Gerald's fork, the particular silence that descended like a verdict when someone said something that was technically a feeling and functionally an accusation. "Lily said that on a Tuesday afternoon," Claire said. Her voice was the same temperature it had been all evening. "I was home by 6:30. I read her 2 chapters of Charlotte's Web. One of us cried at the end." She paused. "It wasn't Lily." Silence. Marcus smiled. The specific smile he produced when something she said failed to wound the way he had intended. The smile that said, "You're being difficult again." "I'm not attacking you," he said. "I'm describing our life." "You're describing one version of it," Claire said. "There's a difference." 7:19 p.m. "How about those Red Sox?" Gerald said. Nobody answered him. Was Claire Bennett sitting at this table because she owed it something? When a woman quietly funds a household, a startup, a sister-in-law's education, and a family's dignity, and receives in return a dinner table that treats her competence as a character flaw, what exactly is the contract she signed? And when the person who has taken the most speaks first about what has been lost, what does that say about the room that lets him? She already knew the answers. She had known them for 7 months. Tonight, she had brought the documentation. 7 months before that dinner, Claire Bennett sat in an office that was not yet big enough for what she was building inside it. The office was on the 14th floor of Callaway and Marsh. A firm that had operated in the city for 41 years had made 11 named partners in that time, and had not yet made one who was a woman. The office was 140 square feet, not a corner. Not a window office, though. The single narrow pane gave her a diagonal slice of the river if she leaned left in her chair, which she did every morning when she first arrived before the work began, as a small private ritual she had not told anyone about. The desk was dark walnut laminate, special ordered because the firm's standard-issue furniture made her feel temporary. The chair had cost her $340 of her own money. She had expensed it, and Gerald Callaway had approved it without comment, which she took as its own form of respect. On the wall hung a Georgia O'Keeffe charcoal, not a reproduction, framed in plain black. Her mother had given it to her the week she passed the bar exam, handed it over in the parking lot of a Denny's in November because Sandra Kowalski did not do ceremony, but she always showed up. Claire had carried it through 3 offices in 11 years. It was the first thing she hung and the last thing she would take down. The rent on the apartment she shared with Marcus was $3,850 per month. Her contribution was $2,700. His was variable. In the past 6 months, his contribution had averaged $410. In February, it had been $200. In March, it had been $0. Fieldline Technologies, the project management software company Marcus had founded 3 years ago with 2 college friends who had since exited, was burning through its operating budget at approximately $28,000 per month. Claire had reviewed the financials herself the previous October at Marcus's request on a Sunday afternoon when he had spread printouts across their kitchen table and asked her to tell him what she saw. She had told him the burn rate was unsustainable at current revenue and that the product market fit metrics in the deck were being interpreted generously. He had told her she didn't understand the startup world. She had told him she understood contracts. He had said those weren't the same thing. She had agreed with him. By January, he had needed money, not in a single conversation. Marcus had never made requests directly. He mentioned the cash flow problem on a Sunday morning over coffee. He mentioned the bank's position on their credit line the following Wednesday on the way to dinner. He mentioned, almost as an aside, that his co-founder's departure had triggered a buyout clause requiring $47,000 within 60 days. She transferred it that Thursday. Between 2 client calls. She did not discuss it with anyone. Marcus had asked her not to. Just until the Series A closes, Claire, I don't want my parents thinking I can't run my own company. She had nodded and sent the wire. By month 4, the Series A had not materialized. By month 6, a vendor had gone unpaid. By month 8, an equipment lease had lapsed and a second buyout clause had activated. Each time, Marcus forwarded her the relevant document with a subject line that was not quite a question. Thoughts, or FYI. Or, once, simply, you always know what to do. She did. She always had. That was the problem and the foundation of everything, assembled quietly over 20 months into a total she had tracked in a spreadsheet she kept in a folder titled Administrative and never opened on shared devices. $214,000. Every transfer labeled the same way in the notes field, personal loan, Marcus Bennett. She was a lawyer. She had been taught by a woman who had learned the hard way. She wrote everything down. On a Tuesday morning in the second week of March, her phone rang. Gerald Callaway's direct line. A man who had spoken to her in full sentences fewer than 10 times in 7 years. She let it ring twice, answered on the third. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. She took no notes. She did not need to. Named partner. The vote had been unanimous. The formal announcement would be made in 7 months, on the morning of April 19th. The offer document would arrive by email within the hour. She had until midnight the night before the announcement to sign and return it. Per firm partnership agreement. Section 4, Clause 12. A clause she had read and reread when she first joined. Failure to execute by the deadline would transfer the nomination to the next eligible candidate, and she would be ineligible for renomination for a minimum of 36 months. Gerald said this without apology because it was not cruel, it was contractual. She had drafted similar language herself. After she hung up, she did not call Marcus. She did not call Diane. She sat at her desk and looked at the Georgia O'Keeffe and the sliver of river through the narrow window, and felt the specific interior stillness of someone who has just received the thing they spent 11 years building toward, and immediately begun calculating the cost of keeping it. Then she opened her calendar. The numbers were immediate. The numbers were brutal. Clock 1. The acceptance document. Midnight, April 18th. Tonight. Sign and return by 11:59 p.m. or the nomination transfers. 36 months minimum before eligibility returns. Non-negotiable. In the contract she had signed, she knew because she had drafted similar clauses herself. Clock 2. The public announcement, 9 a.m., April 19th, tomorrow. 32 journalists on the press list. Her photograph already selected. Her biography already drafted by the firm's communications team. The name on the release and the name on the signed agreement needed to match. There was no version of tomorrow morning where she was absent, and it ended well. Clock 3. Lily. 6 years old. Tonight was Friday, which meant chapter reading night, which had been chapter reading night every Friday since Lily was 3, and had announced with the full authority of a person who has recently discovered narrative and will not be moved by logistics that someone needed to read to her until she fell asleep. Claire had missed chapter reading night exactly twice in 3 years. Both times she had found a drawing on her pillow when she got home. The first was a bed with a sad face in it. The second was a bed with a sad face in it, except this time the sad face was wearing a blazer. She had kept both drawings in the top drawer of her desk at work, behind the $214,000 spreadsheet in the folder marked Administrative. Bedtime was 7:45 p.m. Current location was the Bennett family home, 40 minutes from the apartment. She picked up the manila folder, checked that all 3 documents were inside, clipped it shut, drove to dinner. Claire was 9 years old, the first time she understood what it meant to let paper do the talking. It was a Tuesday in November. She remembered this because it was the week after Halloween and the house still smelled faintly of the candle her mother had burned inside a carved pumpkin on the front step. A cheap cinnamon candle from the drugstore that Sandra had bought on clearance and which had, in her words, smelled like a dessert that couldn't commit to a flavor. Claire was at the kitchen table doing long division when she heard the front door. Not a slam. Sandra Kowalski did not slam doors, but something in the specific weight of the sound told Claire to look up. Her mother was still in scrubs. She had worked a double shift at St. Margaret's Regional Medical Center, 16 hours on the cardiac floor, beginning at 6 that morning, which meant she had been awake since 5. Her hair was pressed flat on one side from the surgical hat she wore in certain procedure rooms. She was carrying her coat over her arm instead of wearing it, which only happened when she had left the building too deep in thought to register the cold. The kitchen fluorescent light caught the underside of her face in a way that made her look both older and more certain than usual. She sat down at the table across from Claire. She did not make tea. She did not take off her shoes. She placed her coat over the back of the chair and sat for a moment, the way people sit when they are deciding which version of a story to tell, and then deciding to tell the real one. "I want to tell you something," she said, not as a lesson, as a fact. Claire closed her math book. Sandra Kowalski had been a registered nurse for 14 years by that November. She had applied for the position of charge nurse on the cardiac floor 3 times. The first time, the position went to a male colleague with 2 fewer years of seniority. The second time, it went to a woman from a different floor whom Sandra herself had trained on cardiac protocols the previous spring. The third time this week, Sandra had been summoned to a meeting with the hospital's department administrator, a man named Richard Fleck, whom the floor nurses referred to as the clipboard, because in 4 years no one had ever seen him without one, and no one had ever seen him use it to write anything of consequence. Richard Fleck had asked Sandra in that meeting whether she had completed the updated credentialing module required for charge nurse eligibility. She had. She had completed it in February 11 months prior and held the certificate of completion in her personnel file and a personal copy at home because Sandra Kowalski maintained duplicates of every professional document she had ever signed, earned, or been issued organized in manila folders in the hallway filing cabinet sorted by year, going all the way back to her original nursing license issued in Columbus, Ohio in 1984. She told Richard Fleck she had completed it. He told her he didn't see it in the system. She told him it was in her personnel record. He told her the system was the record. She stood up. She excused herself without urgency. She walked to the nursing station, retrieved her personal bag from her locker, removed the copy of the credentialing certificate she kept there because she kept copies everywhere. Because she had learned over 14 years that the people who controlled systems did not always maintain them accurately, and that the only reliable defense against that was documentation held in your own hands. And she walked back into Richard Fleck's office, placed the certificate on the desk directly in front of him, and sat back down. She did not say, "I told you so." She did not say, "This is what I have been dealing with." She did not raise her voice. She did not lower her eyes. She sat. She waited. She let the paper do what paper does when it has been properly kept. It simply existed undeniably in the room with them. Richard Fleck had looked at the certificate for a long time. Then he updated the system. Sandra did not receive the charge nurse position that cycle. There were other administrators, other clipboards, other Richard Flecks waiting in other hallways. But she left that office having asked for nothing she had not already proven she deserved. That was the part she wanted Claire to understand. Not the victory, which was partial, the posture, which was not. The thing about paper she sat at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, still in her scrubs coat, still over the chair, back the cinnamon candle smell still faint in the cold air coming under the front door, is that it doesn't need you to fight for it, it just needs you to keep it. Put your name on everything you build, baby, everything, because the only thing that stays when people leave is what's written down. Claire had been 9. She had not fully understood what was being handed to her, but she had gone to her room afterward and written her name, in permanent marker, black, unhurried, on the inside cover of every notebook she owned. She had kept that habit for 23 years. She had kept the habit through law school, through the bar exam, through 3 firms and 11 years and 6 years of a marriage, in which she had quietly underwritten a failing startup, a college education, 2 utility crises, and a family's dignity. All of it documented, all of it dated, all of it in her own name. Tonight, the manila folder in her briefcase contained 3 documents. All of them had her name on them. Tonight was the night her mother's lesson would be tested to its foundation. Patricia Bennett had found Claire in the entrance hallway 40 minutes before dinner, while Claire was still unwinding her scarf, coat not yet hung, briefcase not yet set down. "I just want to mention," Patricia said, in the specific register she used when she had rehearsed something and wanted it to sound unrehearsed, "that Marcus has had a really difficult week. The investor meeting didn't go the way he was hoping. He's holding it together, but—" She paused. Her hands moved toward each other and then stopped. "I just think tonight it would help everyone if we could be easy. You know how he gets when he feels like things aren't going his way." Claire looked at her mother-in-law. Patricia Bennett was 63 years old. She had warm eyes, a good laugh, and a consistent, deeply embedded tendency to redistribute the cost of Marcus's behavior onto whoever in the room was most willing to absorb it. She was not a cruel woman. She was something Claire had come to understand was more complicated than cruelty. A woman who had spent 4 decades maintaining peace by deciding, quietly and without examination, that the people who caused disruption were less responsible for it than the people who reacted to it. "I'm always easy, Patricia," Claire said. She hung her coat. She set her briefcase beside the chair at the far end of the table. The chair she always took slightly apart from the main cluster which Patricia had once described as Claire being independent, and which Marcus had once described as Claire being separate, and which was in fact simply where Claire sat, because it was the chair closest to the door. 7:02 p.m. 53 minutes until Lily's bedtime story. 4 hours and 57 minutes until midnight. By the time the main course was served, Marcus had found his rhythm. Claire recognized it the way you recognize weather when you have lived in a particular climate long enough. Not by looking at the sky, but by the feeling in your joints before anything has visibly changed. It began with a comment about her personality. Then the comment about Lily asking if Mommy lived at work. Then, between the salad course and the chicken, a third rotation. Gerald was midway through a story about the Pattersons' sunroom renovation when Marcus said, conversationally, looking at no one in particular, "Claire's been looking at some listings, actually." Amy glanced up from her plate. "Bigger place," Marcus continued, "better school district, closer to the firm." He offered Claire a mild smile across the table, the kind that presented itself as affection. "I understand why that's the priority right now." "I haven't been looking at listings," Claire said. "I thought you sent me that Zillow link. I sent you an article about school district funding formulas in our zip code. For a case involving a property dispute." A pause of exactly the right length. "Right," Marcus said. "I must have misread it." He had not misread it. They both knew that. What he had done was extract a piece of information from a private exchange, remove its context, and place it at the center of this table where 7 people without that context could interpret it freely. This was the mechanism. Not fabrication, not confrontation, but a series of small rotations applied to fact until the shape of things became unrecognizable to the person who had lived them. By the time anyone pushed back, the original thing had already been replaced. "Stability matters," Marcus said then, to the table generally, with the tone of someone offering wisdom rather than strategy, especially when one parent is away a lot. "Lily needs anchors, family close by, a neighborhood she knows." He gestured briefly at the room. "I think that counts for something." Gerald nodded in the thoughtful way of a man who has learned that nodding keeps him equidistant from all positions. Patricia passed the bread. Uncle Robert said something about property values. Carol asked if anyone wanted more wine. And Amy, who had been watching this with the particular alertness of someone who had grown up in this family and knew exactly what a rotation sounded like, picked up her fork and said nothing. That was when Claire noticed the photograph on the sideboard behind Gerald's chair. Marcus and Amy, childhood, a lake somewhere, Marcus's arm around his sister, both of them squinting into August light. Someone at an early family dinner, Patricia probably, had told Claire that Marcus had always been protective of Amy. He'd do anything for her, she had said. He always has. Claire thought about the $38,400 that had left her personal checking account over 22 months. Tuition, housing, the study abroad semester that Amy had told her parents was covered by a departmental scholarship. A scholarship that had been, in fact, a series of wire transfers from Claire's account, initiated each semester after Marcus texted a variation of the same message. "Amy's hold is back. Can you handle it?" Don't make it a whole thing. Amy did not know. Claire had never told her. Marcus had asked her not to. She'd feel weird about it, he had said. Let her think it's the scholarship. It's better for her confidence. Claire had agreed because she had been, at that point, still inside the architecture of a belief she was only now fully dismantling. The belief that if she was generous enough, patient enough, useful enough, the people she loved would eventually extend to her the same protection she had been quietly building for them. She had been wrong about that. But the documentation was correct. It always was. Her phone lay face down beside her water glass. The screen had lit twice in the past 40 minutes. She had not looked at it. She knew who it was. She knew what it said. She picked up her fork and cut a piece of chicken into thirds, then into sixths, and waited for the dinner to become what it had always been going to become tonight. The graduate program came up the way most important things came up at the Bennett dinner table. Sideways, attached to something else, so that by the time you understood what was actually being discussed, the moment for addressing it directly had already passed. Amy had been accepted to a master's program in urban planning at a university 3 states away. She mentioned it carefully, watching the room before committing to the full sentence. She had not sent in her enrollment deposit yet. The deadline was the end of the month. There were application fees for 2 backup programs still outstanding, $195 combined, and she had been trying to figure out the timing. The scholarship covered the tuition, she said, looking mostly at her plate. It's just the incidental stuff, the deposit, the fees. I'll figure it out. Marcus leaned back in his chair. We'll take care of it, he said, generously. in the voice he used when he was performing a version of himself he found flattering. He looked at Gerald and then at Patricia with the expression of someone who has just made a decision on behalf of a group that did not include them in the conversation. Patricia smiled. Gerald nodded. Amy looked up with the particular gratitude of someone who has been carrying a quiet worry and has just been told it will be handled. The specific relief of a person who does not yet know what the handling will cost or who it will cost, or who has been quietly paying for things in this family for longer than anyone at the table has acknowledged. "Thank you," Amy said. "Really. I don't know what I'd do without this family." Marcus lifted his wine glass slightly, the smallest possible toast, and looked across the table at Claire with an expression so brief and so precisely calibrated that no one else would have caught it. A flicker. A ledger item being logged. Claire caught it. She had been catching it for 20 months. She simply had not, until tonight, decided what to do with the record she had kept. She looked at Amy's face, 26 years old and earnest, and entirely unaware that the scholarship that had covered her tuition for 2 years was not a scholarship. That the family that Marcus had just promised to handle her deposit was one person's checking account. That the gratitude she was directing at the table had a specific correct address that had never once received it. Amy was not a prop. She was a person who had been kept deliberately uninformed so that someone else could wear her gratitude like a coat. Claire picked up her phone. 7:41 p.m., 4 minutes until Lily's bedtime. 4 hours and 18 minutes until midnight. 3 messages, all unread, all waiting. She opened them in order. The first was from Diane. "Claire, it's 7:38. The document has to be signed and returned tonight, you know that. Gerald Calloway's assistant called me 20 minutes ago to ask if you'd had a chance to review it." I didn't know what to tell her. "I have been sitting at my desk for 2 hours waiting for you to call me back. Please, whatever is happening tonight, it can wait. This cannot. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. About a lot of things. Please call me." The second was from the firm's communications coordinator. "Ms. Bennett, just a reminder that the press release goes to the wire service at 8 a.m. tomorrow. We need your approval on the biography paragraph by 10 p.m. tonight if you'd like any revisions. If we don't hear from you by 10, we'll proceed with the draft on file. Congratulations again. We're all very proud." The third was from Megan, Lily's babysitter. "Hi, Claire. Lily wanted me to tell you she already picked the chapter for tonight. She picked the one with the spider. She says you know which one. She's been holding the book since 6:30. She made me put a bookmark in it so you'd know where to start." Claire read all 3 messages. She did not reply to any of them. She put the phone face down beside her plate, looked at Amy, who was telling Patricia about the program's thesis requirements, looked at the manila folder in her briefcase, visible through the gap in the leather where the clasp didn't fully close. She thought, with the specific clarity of a person who has finally stopped asking for permission to see clearly, if she left now she could be home by 8:20. Lily would still be awake. She could read chapter 19, the one where Charlotte begins to tire and Wilbur does not yet understand what is coming, and she could sign the document at the kitchen table after Lily fell asleep, scan it from her phone, and return it before 11. She could let tonight be what Marcus wanted it to be, an evening she absorbed and then drove away from, the same way she had driven away from dozens of evenings before it. She could do that. She thought about everything she would leave at this table if she did. Amy, who did not know, the $38,400 that had left Claire's account under the word scholarship, while Marcus accepted thank yous at family dinners. The $214,000 that had left her savings under the label personal loan, Marcus Bennett, while Marcus described himself to investors as a self-funded founder. The 2 drawings Lily had left on her pillow. The blazer with the sad face in it. The document waiting to be signed. Her mother at a kitchen table in November, coat still over her arm, saying, "Put your name on everything you build, baby. Everything." She looked at Amy one more time. Amy was smiling at something Patricia had said. There was an open quality to her face, the expression of someone who feels, in this moment, genuinely held. Someone who believes the room around her is what it presents itself as being. Claire understood something then that she had been circling for 20 months without landing on directly. The lie was not only what it cost her, the lie was what it cost everyone inside it, including the people who didn't know they were inside it. She reached down, picked up her briefcase. set it on the chair beside her. She did not open it. Not yet. Not for 3 more minutes. Patricia noticed the briefcase move. Her shoulders shifted fractionally. Marcus across the table continued his conversation with Gerald about the sunroom renovation. Square footage contractor quotes resale value, but Claire saw his eyes track the briefcase and returned to Gerald's face without pausing. The practiced peripheral awareness of someone who has learned to monitor rooms without appearing to. He knew something had changed. He did not know yet what it was. It was Uncle Robert who gave Marcus the opening, though he would not have known he was doing it. Robert had been describing a colleague at his firm, a woman who had recently made partner, and he said with the cheerful obliviousness of someone who thought he was paying a compliment, "She's impressive. Really driven. Though I wonder sometimes if her husband gets much of her." Marcus set down his fork. "That's the thing, isn't it?" he said. "Not a question. The specific cadence of a man who has been waiting for an entry point and has found one. There's a version of ambition that lifts everyone around you. And there's a version that consumes the oxygen in a room without meaning to." Gerald looked at the table. Patricia looked at her hands. Amy looked at Marcus. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Marcus continued, addressing the room with the measured openness of someone sharing a difficult personal truth about what it means to build something together. A marriage, a family, what it requires from both people. He looked at Claire then, directly, for the first time all evening with no performance layered over it. "I think sometimes when one person is very focused on their individual success, they don't always notice what's being asked of the people around them." 7:49 p.m. The table had gone quiet in the way tables go quiet when something that was in the walls of the room has finally been said out loud. Uncle Robert looked at his plate. Carol set her phone down completely, the first time all evening. Gerald cleared his throat twice and then appeared to decide that neither attempt had been sufficient and said nothing. Patricia's right hand moved toward Marcus and then stopped 3 inches short of his arm, hovering briefly before returning to her lap. Amy looked at Claire. Claire looked at the folder. "Marcus," Amy said, in a voice that was careful and quiet and trying, "maybe we could." "I'm not attacking anyone," Marcus said, not looking at Amy. "I'm talking about our family. I think that's allowed." "You've been talking about Claire," Amy said. "That's different." The table went a degree quieter. Marcus turned to look at his sister with an expression Claire had seen him use on contractors, on investors, on anyone who interrupted a narrative he was managing. Patient. Slightly disappointed. "Amy," he said, "I love you. But you don't live with us." It was said gently. That was the particular skill. Everything said gently, everything delivered in the register of concern, so that the only available response was either agreement or the appearance of aggression. If Claire pushed back, she was defensive. If Amy pushed back, she was overstepping. If anyone in the room said, "Wait, that's not fair," they were making it bigger than it needed to be, which was the phrase this family used, the way other families used locks on doors. Claire's phone lit up on the table. She looked at the screen. A 4th message. "Diane again. Claire. It's 7:51. I don't know what's happening tonight. I should have called you after the holiday party." "I should have said something then. I'm saying it now. Please don't let tonight be the thing that costs you this. You have worked 11 years for that letter. Please." 7:51 p.m. 54 minutes until Lily's bedtime story ended and she fell asleep holding Charlotte's Web with a bookmark in chapter 19. 4 hours and 8 minutes until midnight. Marcus was still talking. He had pivoted slightly, now addressing Gerald about partnership dynamics in business. An analogy that was not subtle. Gerald was nodding with the expression of a man who understood exactly what was being said and had decided the right response was to appear as though he did not. Patricia was looking at the centerpiece. Amy was looking at Claire. And Claire looked, one final time, at everything she stood to lose if she reached into that briefcase. The signed partnership agreement if she left now and returned to it later. The dinner that might, theoretically, be recovered. The version of this marriage that could still, if she absorbed tonight the way she had absorbed 100 nights before it, be maintained for another season. She thought about the photograph of Sandra Kowalski on her phone, the only one she had taken at a church picnic in 1997. Sandra in a yellow dress laughing at something off camera. The laugh of a woman who had decided at some point before that photograph that she was not going to spend her life apologizing for the space she took up. Sandra had not been in this room. But she had prepared Claire for it. Claire reached into the briefcase. She removed the manila folder. She set it on the table beside her plate, clipped side up, without opening it. Marcus stopped talking mid-sentence. The room, which had been declining toward quiet for the past 4 minutes, arrived there completely. Into that silence, Claire said, in the same temperature of voice she had used all evening, 7 words. I need to tell you some things. Claire opened the manila folder. She removed the first document and placed it on the table in front of her, face up, positioned so that anyone nearby could read it if they chose to. She did not hold it up, she did not wave it. She placed it the way her mother had placed a credentialing certificate on Richard Fleck's desk 23 years ago, without theater, without apology, as an object that had earned its place in the room. It was a spreadsheet, printed on 3 pages, stapled at the corner. 20 months of entries, each line containing a date, a dollar amount, a partially redacted receiving account number, and a note field. The note field on every single line read the same thing. Personal loan. Marcus Bennett. The total at the bottom of the 3rd page, formatted in bold, $214,000. Marcus looked at the spreadsheet. He did not move. This is a record of transfers from my personal checking account to the operating account of Fieldline Technologies, Claire said, spanning January of last year through September of this year. 20 months. 41 individual transactions. The dining room was completely silent. The average transfer was $5,219, she continued, in the same voice she used when reading case facts into the record. The largest single transfer was $47,000, made on January 14th to cover a co-founder buyout clause. The most recent was $8,400, made September 3rd, to settle an outstanding vendor invoice forwarded to me with the subject line, Thoughts. Gerald put his fork down. Patricia's hands, folded in her lap all evening, opened slowly. Amy was completely still. Marcus said her name. She did not look at him. She removed the second document from the folder. 17 pages, screenshots, printed 2 per page, each one time-stamped and labeled in the header with the sender's name and the date received. She placed it on the table beside the spreadsheet. These are text messages, she said. From Marcus's number to mine over the same 20-month period. I've organized them by category. She turned to the first tab section. Category 1, requests for transfers, marked urgent or time-sensitive, averaging 1 every 18 days. Category 2, requests for confidentiality, specifically requests that I not inform his parents or his business contacts about the nature of the transfers. There are 11 of those. She turned to the second tab. Category 3, projected repayment timelines. There are 6 of these. The most recent is from April of this year, when Marcus indicated he would begin repayment once the Series A closes. She looked up. She looked at Marcus directly for the first time since she had opened the folder. The Series A has not closed, she said. The room did not produce any sound. What that means, Claire continued, is that for 20 months I have been the primary financial support for this household for a startup I was not consulted on founding, and for several family expenses that were presented to this table as having been handled by someone else. She set the document down. That is not a complaint, it is a record. Records do not require anyone's agreement to be accurate. Marcus's voice, when it came, had been stripped of the pleasant register he had maintained all evening. You're doing this here, at my parents' table, in front of everyone. You've been doing something here for 6 years, Claire said. I'm using different language. He leaned forward. You planned this. You brought all of this here on purpose. I came to dinner, Claire said. I came with a bottle of wine and a folder I maintain for professional reasons. What happened at this table between 7 and 8 o'clock tonight was your choice, Marcus, same as it has been every time. A sound from Amy's side of the table. Not words yet, the specific intake of breath that precedes them. Claire turned to her. Amy, she said it quietly, without accusation, without ceremony. The scholarship that covered your tuition and housing for the past 2 academic years was not a departmental award. It was a series of wire transfers from my personal account. Marcus asked me not to tell you because he was concerned you would feel uncomfortable. She paused 1 beat. I'm telling you now because you thanked this table tonight for something this table did not do, and you deserve to know who actually did it. Amy did not speak. Her eyes moved to Marcus. Marcus looked at the centerpiece. Claire reached into the folder one final time. The third document was 2 pages. Cream-colored paper, heavier stock than the others, with the Callaway and Marsh letterhead embossed at the top. She had read it 17 times in 7 months. She knew every word. She had helped draft similar language for other partnerships in other contexts and had never imagined she would be the name at the top. She laid it on the table. She removed a pen from the interior pocket of her briefcase. A black Pilot, the same kind her mother had bought in bulk from the hospital supply room and used for nursing notes for 28 years. Because Sandra Kowalski had left Claire 17 of them in a shoebox along with everything else, and Claire had been working through them slowly. She read aloud, without inflection, the relevant clause. Named partner designation, effective upon execution of this agreement by the accepting party no later than 11:59 p.m. on April 18th. Failure to execute by this deadline shall result in transfer of nomination per Section 4, Clause 12 of the existing partnership agreement. She looked at the clock above the sideboard. 11:47 p.m. She signed her name. Claire A. Bennett. Yoan hurried. The way she had written her name on the inside cover of every notebook she owned since she was 9 years old in permanent marker, precise and without apology. Because a woman had told her at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning that the only thing that stays when people leave is what is written down. She photographed the signed page with her phone, attached it to an email, sent it to Diane with a subject line that was 3 words, signed, "Thank you." She capped the pen, put it back in her pocket. Fairness, she said to the room, to no one in particular and everyone at once, is not a feeling. It is a practice. It is documented, consistent, and visible to anyone who decides to look. She closed the folder, laid her hand flat on top of it for one moment. I have been making it visible for 20 months. Tonight, I simply turned on the lights. For a moment, nobody moved. The candles in the ceramic dish burned at the same height they had been burning all evening. The dishes were still on the table. Everything in the room was physically identical to what it had been 8 minutes ago, except for the specific weight of the air, which had shifted the way air shifts when something that has been present for a long time without being acknowledged has finally been given its correct name. Marcus sat with both hands flat on the table, looking at the spreadsheet. Not at Claire, not at his parents. At the columns of numbers, the 41 lines, the dates, the amounts, the note field that said the same thing 41 times. He had the expression of a man who has spent years controlling the version of events that circulates in a room and has just encountered the version that does not require his participation to exist. He did not speak. Patricia reached toward him, the same movement she had made and stopped 3 inches short of, all evening 4 separate times. This time she did not complete it either. Her hand returned to her lap. Her eyes were wet, but the expression behind them was not grief exactly. It was something quieter and more permanent. The specific recognition of a woman who has spent a long time protecting someone and has just understood, at full resolution, exactly what she was protecting him from and what it had cost. Gerald stood up. He walked around the table slowly, the way older men walk when they are carrying something they have not put down in years. He came to Claire's side and stood beside her chair and looked at the signed partnership letter still lying on the table, her name at the bottom in black ink, the Callaway and Marsh letterhead at the top. He stood there for a long moment. "Congratulations," he said. His voice was uneven in a way that had nothing to do with volume. "On the partnership." He paused. "On all of it." Claire looked at him. "Thank you, Gerald," she said. Amy had not moved from her chair. She was looking at Marcus. Not with anger, not yet, which would come later in a different room on a different night when she had the space to sit with the full geometry of what she had just learned. Right now she was looking at him with the careful attention of someone recalibrating something they believed to be solid. 26 years old, perceptive in the specific way that people are perceptive when they have grown up reading the subtext of this particular room, and now in possession of a fact that reorganized 2 years of memory. Every thank you she had directed at this table. Every time she had told her parents she did not know what she would have done without this family. Every semester she had started with the particular relief of someone who has been caught before they fell. The actual source of the catching had been across from her all evening, cutting chicken into sixths, waiting. "Claire," Amy said, just her name, 1 syllable. A door opening inward. "You don't have to say anything tonight," Claire said. Uncle Robert and Carol sat in the stillness of people who have witnessed something they will not fully process until they are in their own car on the drive home. Carol had put her phone completely away. Robert was looking at the table with the expression of a man quietly revising a sentence he had said 42 minutes ago about driven women and the oxygen they consume. Claire picked up her briefcase. She slid the manila folder inside. She picked up her phone, opened her contacts, pressed a name. It rang twice. "Hi." Megan's voice hushed, the particular quiet of a house where a child has recently fallen asleep. "Is she out?" Claire asked. "About 20 minutes ago. She held the book the whole time. She kept asking me what time it was." Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. "Tell her," she started. "I'll tell her you called," Megan said, "and that you'll read 2 chapters tomorrow. She'll want to negotiate for 3. Tell her 3, Claire said. She wins." She hung up, she put on her coat, she picked up the bottle of Malbec from the sideboard. She had brought it, and she had not opened it, and she was taking it home. And she walked to the front door without looking back at the table, not because she was performing an exit, but because there was nothing left in that room that required her presence. The cold air met her at the front step. She stood in it for a moment, briefcase in one hand, Malbec in the other. The signed partnership letter inside the folder, inside the briefcase with her name on it in black ink, time-stamped 11:47 p.m., sent and received, permanent and documented and real. Then she walked to her car. 3 months later, Diane Park did not apologize with words first. She had tried that once. A text message sent at 11:48 p.m. on the night of April 18th, 11 minutes after Claire's email arrived with the subject line, "Signed. Thank you." Claire had read it and not replied, not because she was punishing Diane, but because some things require more than a sentence, and Diane had understood that too, had sat with it, had let it sit. What Diane did instead was request a meeting with the firm's HR committee in May, 3 weeks after the partnership announcement went public. She proposed the creation of a formal protocol, the first of its kind at Callaway and Marsh in 41 years, for documenting witnessed incidents of professional undermining that intersect with domestic or spousal relationships and affect workplace performance reviews. The proposal took 6 weeks to be approved. 2 committee members said it overstepped the firm's purview. One asked Diane directly what had prompted it. Diane answered directly. That answer cost her something in the room, and she paid it without negotiating. The protocol was implemented in July. Diane still kept a photograph on her phone. Not the official holiday party photograph, but a candid she had taken of Claire laughing at something across the room before Marcus arrived and the register of the evening changed. She looked at it sometimes when she was deciding whether to speak up about something, not as permission, as a record of what the alternative cost. Marcus Bennett did not lose everything on the night of April 18th. That was not how it worked. That was not how it should work. What happened was slower, more procedural, and in many ways more accurate than any single evening could have produced. A forensic accountant retained in May by Claire's attorney spent 11 weeks reviewing the Fieldline Technologies financial records against the transfers in Claire's spreadsheet. The review identified $214,000 in personal loans that had not been recorded on the company's balance sheet, 14 instances of Marcus representing himself to investors as a self-funded founder, and 6 cases of pitch deck revenue projections that could not be supported by the company's actual trailing financials. The findings were referred to the state's Securities Regulatory Board in August. The investigation is ongoing. Marcus has retained counsel. He is not in prison. He is not ruined in the way that makes for clean endings. He exists in the specific suspended state of a person who has been required, for the first time in his adult life, to exist inside a process he cannot narrate his way out of. His attorney has advised him not to contact Claire directly. He has complied. He has not, as far as anyone knows, apologized to Amy. Amy Bennett enrolled in her master's program in September. Urban planning, 3 states away. She paid her own enrollment deposit, $500, which she had been saving since July, and she called Claire the night before her first day of classes. The call lasted 44 minutes. Claire did not document it. Some conversations are just conversations. Amy is doing well. She has a studio apartment with a window that faces east. She told Claire in October that she has started keeping a filing system, documents organized by category, then by year, going back to her undergraduate financial records. She said she wasn't entirely sure why. She said she just felt better knowing where things were. Claire told her she understood exactly why. At Callaway and Marsh, 3 months after the announcement, the numbers told a story that press releases rarely do honestly. 2 additional women had been elevated to the named partner track, the first time in 41 years that more than one woman held that status simultaneously. Associate retention among women under 40 had increased by 31% between the first and third quarters. The firm's pro bono partnership with a local women's legal aid organization, proposed by Claire in her first week as named partner and approved within 9 days, had taken on 17 new cases, with 4 reaching resolution. Average billable hour rates across Claire's client portfolio had increased by 18% in 90 days, which the managing partner described in the quarterly review as remarkable, and which Claire described privately as the natural result of being allowed to work without spending a portion of every day managing how she was perceived. She had also retained an attorney and negotiated the personal loan, all $214,000, into a formal repayment agreement, secured against Fieldline's intellectual property assets, signed by Marcus in September. The agreement specified quarterly installments over 36 months. The first payment arrived in October, on time. Claire was not running the firm's daily operations. That was not what named partner meant, and she had hired people for that, which was the point of building something correctly. She was at her desk most mornings by 7:30, coffee going cold beside her keyboard, the Georgia O'Keeffe on the wall, the sliver of river through the window if she leaned slightly left. She had purchased a new desk in May, corner unit, natural light. Her name was on the door in the same font as every named partner who had preceded her, except that none of them had been her, which was the only thing about the font that mattered. On Friday evenings, she was home by 6:30. Lily had moved on from Charlotte's Web. They were now 3 chapters into The Secret Garden, which Lily had selected because, as she explained with the authority of someone who has recently discovered that stories have themes, it had a garden and a mystery, and nobody in it was allowed to go where they wanted to go, which she felt was interesting. Claire had agreed it was interesting. They read until Lily fell asleep, which took between 1 and 2 chapters depending on how strongly Lily felt about the plot developments of a given evening. The thing Claire had kept from April 18th was not the signed letter, though she kept that too, filed correctly in the cabinet beside her desk. It was not the spreadsheet or the screenshots or the time-stamped photograph of her name at the bottom of the partnership agreement at 11:47 p.m. What she kept was simpler than any of those things. It was the question she could not answer on the drive home, the Malbec on the passenger seat, the signed document in her briefcase, the cold still on her face from the front step. The question was not, did I do the right thing, because she knew the answer to that. The question was, why did it take this long, what she had been waiting for? What she had believed would eventually change if she was patient enough, useful enough, documented enough, quiet enough. She did not have a clean answer. She suspected she never would. She kept the question anyway. It seemed important to keep the questions you could not resolve. Her mother had taught her that too, though never directly. Sandra Kowalski had simply lived it, in scrubs, at kitchen tables, in hallways outside administrators' offices for 28 years, and had left Claire 17 black pilot pens in a shoebox and 1 sentence that was still working. Something real happened in that dining room on the night of April 18th. A woman with a folder and a pen and 20 months of documentation walked into a room that had been arranged against her and declined to be arranged. She named what had been done. She placed paper on a table. She signed her name, sent it, and left. The system, in this case, moved. Slowly, procedurally, imperfectly, but measurably. A protocol was written and approved. A partnership track opened for the first time in 4 decades. A repayment agreement was signed and honored. A young woman 3 states away began keeping her own files. Numbers changed. Something bent toward accountability. These things are real. They matter. They are worth saying out loud. But this story also proved something harder to celebrate. Claire Bennett won because she was a lawyer who understood what the notes field in a bank transfer record means in a proceeding. She won because her mother was a nurse who handed her the architecture of self-protection at a kitchen table in 1999 in the form of a habit she maintained for 23 years. She won because she had a career that gave her the financial independence to absorb $214,000 and still be standing at the end of it. She won because she had a colleague who, late and imperfectly, decided to speak. She won because she had the specific combination of documentation, professional language, financial runway, and institutional knowledge required to make a room go quiet in the right direction. Remove any one of those things. What about the woman who kept the same records but doesn't have a law degree to understand what they prove? What about the woman who funded the same failing startup but has no remaining savings by the time the dinner happens? What about the woman whose Diane never sends the text? What about the woman who did not have a Sandra Kowalski at 2 in the morning, handing her the habit of writing her name on everything she builds? How many rooms like that dining room exist tonight right now wherever you are watching from, in which someone is being systematically reframed as the problem and has no folder and no letter? And no pen that belonged to her mother, and no one in the doorway who finally decided that staying out of it too long was its own kind of choice? What does it say about the stories we return to most? The ones that end with a signed document and a room that goes quiet in the right way, that we tell them so readily and so often, that we find it easier to imagine the version where the paper exists than to ask why so many people cannot afford to keep it, cannot afford to leave, cannot afford the 44-minute phone call that begins to repair what was broken? Claire Bennett walked out of that house at 11:51 p.m. with her name on a partnership letter and her mother's pen in her pocket. Thousands of people walk out of rooms like that one every single night with nothing written down, no process to refer anything to, no language that accurately names what was done to them, and no one in their corner who decided in time. That is also a true story. It simply does not end with a folder on a table. It ends with the question of what we owe the people for whom the folder was never possible, and whether we will keep telling the other story instead, because it is easier to watch, easier to share, easier to feel something clean about. Some things are real and insufficient at the same time. That is where this story ends. That is where yours begins. At Revenge Files SA Tree, we don't soften the emotion or dilute the message. We tell powerful fictional stories inspired by the real dynamics that too many people navigate in silence, in marriages, in offices, at dinner tables. In rooms where the person who caused the damage has learned to speak first and speak softest, and let the room do the rest. If tonight's story moved you, if it made you see something you couldn't unsee, if it named something you have been trying to find words for, if it made you think about a folder you should have started keeping a long time ago, hit like. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you would have done with those 3 documents. Subscribe, because the next story is already waiting. Because the conversation doesn't end here, it's just beginning. This is a fictional story inspired by real dynamics documented in public research on financial coercion, professional undermining in intimate partnerships, and gender equity in legal and corporate workplaces. All characters, institutions, events, and organizations depicted are entirely invented. Claire Bennett, Marcus Bennett, Callaway and Marsh, Fieldblind Technologies, Sandra Kowalski, and all other named entities are fictional constructs. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or to real organizations is entirely coincidental.